Hey everybody, and welcome back for episode 2 of Trekyards. I'm Captain Foley, and of course I'm joined by my friends and associate, Samuel Cockings.
Hi, everybody.
And today we're going to be looking at the legendary warp ship, the Phoenix,
Ooh,
developed by Zefram Cochrane and seen in Star Trek First Contact.
quite a important ship, the first of its kind. So, monumental one.
Exactly.
So, some basic details. It was 31 meters high, about 3.05 meters, and about 154,000 kilograms. So heavy.
In comparison to the Phoenix height, or actually probably length when it's in space, 31.339 meters. A Danube-class shuttle is 23.1 meters, and it's roughly also about the size of 4.5 TOS Galileo shuttles as far as length goes.
So it's big, but not too big.
Yeah, exactly.
It's no Galaxy class.
No.
And like I said, this was Zefram Cochrane's first warp ship, and it was Earth's first warp ship.
Mm-hmm. And Cochrane named it after the mythical phoenix that rose from the ashes, because they were just rising from the ashes of World War III. And what better way to usher in a new era than to use the phoenix as a name? Yes, exactly.
So its main body is constructed of an old nuclear missile, a Titan II ICBM, or Intercontinental Ballistic Missile.
Yeah. According to some non-canon sources regarding this particular ship, they actually say it's a Titan V rocket. However, the Titan V was not a missile. It was a 3-engine payload rocket, which launched from a launch pad and not a silo. So the correct one is the Titan II.
Okay, yeah, and like I said, it's Titan II, and it was a basic missile body, but they added a special capsule to the front so they could put people in it. Mm. So the first flight in First Contact was April 5th, 2063 at 11 a.m., despite those pesky time-travelling Borg. and that was a very specific time because obviously you could do a warp test flight whenever, but it was that precise window that the Vulcan ship would detect them. So
and it was launched from an abandoned missile silo in Bozeman, Montana.
The first warp test flight was a little under a minute, just to get out there enough.
To get the attention of that passing Vulcan ship.
And something interesting to sort of side note, we saw in the Enterprise episode Into a Mirror Darkly, the opening scene is the scene from First Contact, which shows that even in the Mirror universe, the evil universe, or the misunderstood universe, as my dad says, Cochrane still had the warp flight, Borg or not. He still had the same flight, same basic time, but instead of reaching out his hand, he shot the Vulcans and took their ships. Mm. That was nice. So it shows that point was a turning point in human history. It set off all sorts for us and for the Mirror universe.
Yeah, it was cool to see that kind of alternate history taking shape. It was really interesting take on things.
Yeah, later on in sort of, I guess, TNG, TOS time, the original Phoenix prototype was moved to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., where Picard went and had a look, but could never touch it. Another little moment in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like when people go to the Smithsonian now and can see the original Enterprise. Actually, on the Enterprise E panel, we can see that this Phoenix warp drive is called the Space Warp Generator and can reach Warp 1. Cochrane himself used the term in reference to his engine, and even as late as 2150, which is about a year before Enterprise, the Warp 5 engine was still officially known as the Gravimetric Field Displacement Manifold.
Wow. So warp drive came out a lot later then.
Well, yeah, the term, but...
well, yeah. Although I do want to point one interesting sort of side note out is that obviously the TOS warp scale and the TNG warp scale are different, which implies that when they say Cochrane went to Warp 1 is not necessarily what we'd think of as Warp 1 in later on. But the warp scales are actually relatively the same at lower levels. It's an exponential increase, so in TNG it would get higher and higher as you get into Warp 7, 8, 9, 10. So probably Warp 1 was... it's the warp barrier, so I think it would have been the same any which scale. Mm-hmm. But let's take a minute to talk about exactly how Cochrane, on Earth, pre-warp, invented warp without dilithium crystals, because we haven't got them on Earth.
Yeah, see, that's a good point. Like you said, no dilithium crystals were on board the Phoenix, so even it's been suggested that maybe even antimatter wasn't even used. The way I like to think about it, the warp nacelles are kind of like wheels on a car. They they help the car move, but any amount of different types of engine configurations can actually power those wheels. So who's to say what he used specifically?
No. But let's assume he did have antimatter. We know what would happen if they interact in the containment chamber, because warp is really, it's not about the ship moving, it's about creating a bubble which changes the mass and how the ship sort of is, and then you sort of move space around it, or sort of, it's complicated.
Yeah, it is science. Basically a warp bubble, and it goes through subspace, moving just space, not the ship. So
yeah, but it's interesting to think we could. Well, the theory itself probably doesn't need dilithium, but to create a stable reaction, certainly at high speeds. So I think it was interesting. Obviously, when the Vulcans came, they probably introduced such things, but we'll get onto that a bit later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the dilithium crystals were basically used to regulate the matter-antimatter reaction, making it much more stable and controllable. Therefore, you could attain those higher speeds. So you didn't really need dilithium crystals to get warp speed, but to attain the higher levels and more controllable, you would need the regulation.
And let's be honest, warp 1, you're not getting very far very quick. So
it's true.
Yeah. But he didn't obviously have access to antimatter. So it's speculated, and theories have suggested it may have used hydrogen or a mini nuclear fusion or even fission reaction device to power the warp drive, but we don't really know.
The next issue that arises, of course, is how do they return to Earth?
I had wondered that, honestly.
Yeah, because presumably it would take like hours, if not days, to go back at sublight speed.
Well, they could have just warped back.
Well, you don't want to point your experimental warp ship at a planet and hopefully it stops on time. But saying that, you also don't want to aim near the planet, totally miss it, and be in a worse predicament, or, it's an experimental craft. There's got to be some kind of thought process put into getting back, and they never really explained that.
Wouldn't that have been awkward if Riker and Geordi and Zefram Cochrane were on the ship and then they walk back and then it smashed into the ground? That would be a very dramatic end to the... Yeah, that would have been really
probably awkward. Even to the planet. That would probably be like dinosaur level extinction.
Probably. I mean, a part of that, he doesn't know what's going to happen. They would have had to have had substantial amounts of food, water, and oxygen. And this is an untested vehicle. It's reckless not to have such things on board. So really, you got to think it's a rocket with an engine with a capsule. Is there really enough space for that much stuff? I don't know.
And even the fuel source, if he does have to come back at sublight speed, what fuel source was he using for that? Where was that stored? You know what I mean? It's just a lot of stuff that...
I think I know. So maybe he had 1% left and he just, had a simple burst and then he just did some music on the 10 hours back. He would be fine.
I like that. That's what I would probably do.
And get drunk. He'd probably get drunk too.
Yeah, well, of course. Now, the thing I don't like about the ship, not only is the engine deployment kind of overcomplicated, but how does the ship land?
Yes.
Should we assume the capsule portion detaches and splashes down,
probably,
leaving the warp section in orbit to be retrieved later? But this seems unlikely because the resources at the time to retrieve a capsule from the ocean would be difficult after World War III, and definitely to secure the warp drive from orbit would be extremely difficult considering the infrastructure they have.
What infrastructure?
Exactly, because Lily said it took her 6 months to scrounge up enough titanium to build the 4-meter large cockpit. So, really, what was the plan for getting back down to Earth?
It's pretty safe to say you haven't got a rescue vehicle standing by on the second launch pad.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. How could it land? And even if they did just jettison it and whatever, losing that technology, I mean, it's your prototype warp ship. If you've left it in orbit, what a waste. But to be honest, I'm not 100% convinced that they could fit all of the warp engines, the warp drive, the normal fuel, the water, the oxygen in this relatively small bundle. When you see the engines extend, I mean, there's not much space left over. And I'm going to leave it as, it's fine, canon, science, whatever, but I'm a little bit skeptical. That's probably the thing I don't like most, is that maybe it's not practically possible, but yeah, I'm okay with it.
Like we've just discussed, there's lots of unanswered questions that just make me scratch my head and go, what the hell? But the thing I do like most about the ship, I do like the irony that it was once a missile, and that he only wanted fame and money, not really looking to usher in a new era for humanity. To use the ICBM as a great starting point for a spaceship. You know what I mean? It's a good platform for testing the warp engines. However, there's an interesting fact. In the original series episode Metamorphosis, when we first meet Zefram Cochrane, Kirk states that he's from Alpha Centauri. Well, as it turns out, before the release of official canon regarding the Phoenix and its launch from Montana seen in First Contact, the non-canon timeline Zefram Cochrane was living on an Earth colony on Alpha Centauri, where he in fact developed warp drive.
Isn't Alpha Centauri meant to be the one of the closest habitable planets?
Yeah, because they arrived on a colony sleeper ship, so they were in stasis for years until they got there, built the colony, and then about 10 years after they arrived is when he developed the warp drive. It was the first human-built warp-capable ship called the UNSS Bonaventure, which was a Cochrane-class ship capable of warp 2.5.
Wow, fast.
It made its first flight from Alpha Centauri to Tau Ceti around 2061, which is a journey of about 12 light years, so it took about 3.5 years to make the trip.
Wow.
Yeah. However, on the Bonaventure's third voyage to Sirius, the ship was unaccountably lost. So, however, that being said, there is a case to be made here that the Phoenix was perhaps the test vehicle for the development of warp, and then later on, I was reading, they actually kind of merged the non-canon and the canon together by saying that, yes, the Phoenix was the first warp ship, but the Bonaventure was the first deep space ship equipped with warp engines, which were kind of refined warp engines because they could do a little bit faster speed than Warp 1. And
Cochrane probably got a lot of extra money thrown at him by whatever governments were remained. So that was the fully fledged warp ship. This was the test bed.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I think the Phoenix makes a lot of sense, and it was definitely awesome to see it on screen. I mean, I think we'd all wondered what was the first ship, and to see it was pretty cool. And like you say, the missile mix. They had to design that. I think they did a wise job. It's an interesting design, relatively simple. I think it works. Yeah,
definitely. So now you want to speak a little bit about the evolution from the Phoenix, or from like missile to Phoenix to NX Alpha to NX-01.
Yeah, because obviously we saw them all in a relatively short time frame. Like obviously the rocket to Phoenix is easy. The Phoenix to NX Alpha is a bit more. It's still clear, but the NX Alpha was interesting. It was in an episode of Enterprise showing how they would improve the engine and try and break more warp barriers. And I think it used the Warp 5 engine, but it could only reach Warp 2.5. Well, they were building the Warp 5 engine. It was the test bed, and Archer was the guy to reach that new warp speed. I think the most interesting part of that development, like you say, between Phoenix, NX Alpha, and NX-01, is that they all have what we'd now consider later standard nacelle designs. They're the blue glowing sections and the red facades. Yet in TOS, they don't have that. Although I have a theory about that. Do you want to hear it, Stuart?
Of course I do.
So what I think maybe is that they developed an engine, they developed simple warp, so up to 5, which is probably 3 in the new scale. But as they would develop faster warp, so let's say warp 7 for TOS roughly, the way they used to build the nacelles couldn't stand up to the stresses of going at such high speed. So as you get further from NX-01 to TOS Connie, they had to keep them more internal, give them more structural integrity with more plating. When we move into the Miranda and Excelsior and TOS refit, they then start having the grills, which are glowing slightly, but it's not out there and being seen. So when they get to TNG, technology's improved so much that suddenly, yes, you can have them out and lovely. So I think that might explain how they sort of skipped a bit.
Well, that's a great in canon, in universe kind of theory.
I'm good at that.
in the real world, Gene Roddenberry initially wanted a blue glow on the inside of the nacelles for the TOS Enterprise, but due to budget restraints and even technology at the time, they really couldn't do that on screen. So, for example, when I built my 350 scale Enterprise, there is the option to light those, and I did. I lit them blue. So technically, it should have been blue all along, but they just never could do it on the physical model. So that kind of explains that little hiccup. But I love your idea of the extra shielding required for that. That's a great hypothesis.
Thank you.
And I think we should probably say that the NX Alpha kind of led to the Bonaventure, the 2.5 warp, and then went to the NX01. Let's put the Bonaventure in the actual timeline.
So I think, let's wrap this up. I think it's a good design. I think First Contact, the guys who were behind it, had a good design. I think they thought it through, and I think it's a cool ship. And I think not really the kind of ship I'd take a joyride in, though. I think I'll leave that out, but a cool ship.
Well, yeah, I might take a ride in it in the holodeck, try it out. But
I'd still be worried.
Yeah. I sort of prefer the non-canon approach to warp drive, but it seems a little more real. But at the same time, with the way that they kind of incorporated that into official canon now, I'm happy with it. The Phoenix is the test bed, and move on from there. But it's a very interesting approach to use the ICBM as a jumping off point, so human can get to the stars, because it's already made to go into orbit. It's already there. So. And
I think it's kind of cool the TNG cast got to see the first warp flight. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's it for the Phoenix, guys. The next ship we're going to be doing, and we always do this at the end of every episode, we pit the ship we just talked about against the next ship. So the next ship we have lined up for you guys is the Miranda class, which of course is the Reliant from Star Trek II.
Awesome ship. Spoilers,
and because I always get the ship we just did, he always gets the upcoming ship. So this is how we're going to play it. I'm the Phoenix, he's the Miranda. So, want me to begin?
Let's start with me. The Miranda class, light cruiser, quite a lot of weapons, some phasers, some torpedoes, aft, forward torpedoes, big crew, big ship. I think a few well-placed torpedoes, or one torpedo might blow you up.
Okay, well let's for argument's sake say that the Phoenix got an upgrade and maybe got two phasers and maybe a photon torpedo launcher if it would fit.
Photonic torpedo. Let's be.
Or sorry, missile. Let's do atomic missile. Something a little bit earlier. There you go.
Okay, we'll give that to you.
Let's say I get close enough to your hull. I kind of pull up a car maneuver, warp in, get underneath your two nacelles before you put your shields up.
Ooh.
Take a few shots, then warp out again. Or failing that, I could always just ram you with warp speed.
Ram me with warp speed? Oh dear. Yeah. Actually, do you think, theoretically then, you could jettison the life pod and then set the engine compartment on autopilot to bash into my ship? Why am I helping you? God, shouldn't give you ideas.
I never thought of that, but that was probably a likely thing that they had. They could separate the capsules in case of an emergency. Yeah. I like that.
So that is probably going to damage me, but I've got 23rd century shields. Assuming that I'm not between you and your shields. Remember, I snuck in there. Yeah, that's true. And you are very maneuverable. You're a TC ship. I think I might still win this, Stuart. Maybe. I'd have to agree with you on that one. But I think with some upgrades, Phoenix might be a better fight. Well, might have a small chance of scratching you, yes. Anyway, guys, that's it for episode 2. Yes, 2. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you. As always, we want your comments and suggestions. Discussion, put it in the comments below or on the Facebook group, Trekyards. Also check out www.trekyards.com. We have a website and it has all the episodes on there so you can catch up if you've missed anything. And make sure you do subscribe to the YouTube because then you'll get the content straight away when it comes out. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting discussions and great ships on the Facebook page. And yeah, definitely subscribe to this channel if you want the automatic updates. So. And I've got to say, it's only been one episode, but I'm already loving some of the suggestions you guys are giving us. Some that I wouldn't have considered or hadn't thought of, and I'm excited to do them, honestly. Yeah, and we've already got like seven or 8 lined up, ready to go. But, so we need suggestions for future ones, so definitely chime in with that. Anyway, guys, this is Captain Foley. And Samuel Cochrane. Signing off for now. We will see you in a little while. Bye-bye.